Hello again, everybody. It is December 29th, 2020. It's Tuesday. Welcome to the Along the Watchtower podcast. My name is LM Walker. And, today we are going to get a quick update on some more election proceedings. That's right, that's still going on. President Donald Trump is still utilizing his ability to the fullest. He will not, and you know what's worse is that he will probably only relent if forced, and because there's no legal way to force him to not exercise his legal ability. He will see this to the very end. So rest assured, this continues. A little bit of interesting news about the CRISPR on the scientific end. It's a gene splicing device, I believe, that's allowed us to better understand the genetic makeup of not only humans but of all life on this planet. So that's cool. And there's actually some interesting news on the pandemic front. Some really, really fascinating stuff that kind of intertwines entertainment and the current pandemic situation. That's probably the thing I'm most excited to talk about. Let's see what else is. Oh, there's some news on the Georgia Senate race. Kind of. A couple of representatives have called for Loeffner and Purdue to face legal to face to be not sued. I think to be incarcerated. We'll read further. I only skimmed it, but like I've mentioned, all these guys are corrupt. Loeffler and Purdue have their corruption, and the other gentleman, I keep forgetting his name, Walton. He's the reverend for the Democratic Party, and he's running in the race as well. And he has his allegations of obstructing a child abuse charge, and we'll read about one of the alleged victims coming forward and talking about their experience when he was director of a child camp. And so we'll get into all of that. But first, please like, share, and subscribe if you like what I'm doing. I can always use the support. Quite frankly, going forward, these things will only get better. I'll try and become more expansive about the topics that I speak about. I am also going to try and do smaller segments. That's what I initially started with, and I really didn't think that was encapsulating all of what I wanted to speak on, nor did it give me the ability that I wanted to kind of flesh out each thing that I speak about. It was too topical. Going forward, I'm gonna try and get different cameras, and obviously always get a better mic. And so yeah, your support will always be appreciated for sure. Going forward, now that we've gotten through that business, because this is I really the pandemic stuff becomes more and more fascinating by the day, right? I'm trying to push away from the election stuff. I've kind of shifted away from that altogether. This is the first time I've gone back to it in a little while, and there this I don't want to ruin it. There is a movie that has come out that, how when the pandemic first started and we all went into lockdown, the movie was it Pandemic? No, Contagion, with Matt Damon and Gwyneth Paltrow with the goo, with the vaginal goo stuff. More props to her, whatever to you, boo boo. But that movie came out and hit number one on Netflix. Everybody was watching it, like they were all. It was trying to get this pseudo sense of understanding about what life under a lockdown would look like and things of that nature, how bad it could possibly get, etc. Obviously, it didn't reach to that because although contagious, it doesn't have that severe of a deployment of disease in and of itself. Although obviously for those who are most at risk, it can be that severe. That being said, there's a movie that's come out, and it came out and there's little to no press about it, right? It is specifically a COVID contagion movie. It is called Songbird, and we will talk about it in a little bit. And it is fascinating to me. He's got my boy Craig Robinson in it. And it is fascinating to me because something similar to that is being proposed. I don't mean the movie Songbird is being proposed. I mean the legislation that in the movie Songbird led to the entire plot of the movie. It's basically the main plot device that drives the movie. It's been kind of placed. It's kind of been put forth to be discussed amongst the state legislature in New York. So we'll get to that. But we'll get to that. But going forward, to begin on the more scientific note, CRISPR helps identify gene that regulates coral's heat stress response. Now, I've spoken before about the effects of the pandemic when it initially started on the environment, and we saw a massive and rapid decrease in carbon emissions from everywhere from China to India to America. We saw things like dolphins in Venice and etc. So, to me, it's always interesting when the what if and reality collide, when we no longer need to postulate and we can actually see the effects in this case, on the environment of what it is that people are proposing if everyone were to just stop driving cars. And you know what I mean? Just, and because, excuse me, what is her name? Her name escaped. Gretchen. Gretchen, last name escapes me. And she's kind of fallen by the wayside. But this is kind of one of the things she proposes about these rapid and critical cessations of carbon emitting activities, which includes driving vehicles and farming, the way we farm, not that farming in and of itself is a carbon. Anyway, I digress. But let's read here from the new atlas. The world's corals face a fight for survival as our oceans continue to warm, and scientists are pulling out all stops in an attempt to give them a fighting chance. An international team of researchers has made a discovery that could prove useful to these efforts, using the CRISPR-Cas9 system to identify a key gene that regulates the coral's response to heat stress. Now, on a side note, right, we have other things that we've utilized our technologies like the CRISPR and our understanding of the human genome and just in general our understanding of genetics. And we've used that to do things like, in the UK, they're pretty big on cosmetic abortions. Now, whether we're irrelevant of where you stand on the right to life, my whole thing about it is to abort a child because it would have something like a cleft lip is kind of abhorrent. Not even kind of, it is abhorrent in my eyes. Although at the end of the day, despite my personal beliefs, I do firmly believe that everyone has a right to their own body and to do with it as they see fit. That includes ingesting whatever chemicals they decide to, or to get whatever operations they deem, they deem they want to get, not even deem important, they feel like they want to get. But it's just, something like 116 babies between 2003, here it is, 157 babies were aborted between 2006 and 2010 due to cleft palates. And it's just things, going forward, technology will be wielded in a multitude of ways that will intercede with culture and what people will consider the natural order of things. Those of you who are familiar with like the cyberpunk genre understand this greatly. Ghost in the Shell, Deus Ex Machina, things like that. We're seeing the onset of the manipulation of genetics on a level that we haven't seen before ever, right? Technology marches forward. With the Neuralink, Elon Musk's Neuralink, I'm going to say it, we will see things like brain hacking, like from Ghost in the Shell. During the demonstration on his pig, which I think is also named Gretchen, ironically enough, one of the reporters there asked what happens if somebody forgets to get an update, and Elon Musk makes a joke, and he does. But as we march forward, it's always my hope that, however altruistic and fantastical it sounds, that technology, will be not our savior, but will be the platform by which we understand the cosmos and existence better, and not to manipulate it, but to be humbled by it. But that's me. To continue in the new atlas, over the past few years, we've looked at a variety of technologies and research projects aimed at shoring up corals' ability to survive. Well, as you know, we need the coral reef. It is part of the microbial aspect of sea life. Not that I'm an oceanographer. It's just all these things fascinate me. But these range from raising turbocharged coral babies in rearing pools, to using underwater speakers to attract fish that replenish damaged reefs, to using floating films to protect vulnerable populations. But all look to address the same problem, known as coral bleaching. This occurs when abnormal sea temperatures stress the algae living in the coral tissue and cause them to leave, breaking a symbiotic relationship that provides the corals with essential nutrients and the algae with a place to live and perform photosynthesis. The departure of the colorful algae leaves the coral withering, white, and in danger of dying. The new research was led by scientists at the Carnegie Institution for Science and sought to investigate the genetic underpinnings of this process. The team leveraged the CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing tool to analyze a sea anemone species called an aptasia, through which they identified a protein called heat shock factor that activates many genes relating to heat stress response. Anemones are close relatives to photosynthetic algae and are considered a good model for study, so the team turned its attention to the coral species Acropora millipora. Again, using CRISPR, the team created mutations in the genes that encode for the HSF1 of the heat shock factor protein in the corals. Without this protein, the mutant coral indeed died more rapidly when subjected to warmer waters. So it allows it to adapt to these warmer waters. This finding not only improves our understanding of why it is that coral respond to abnormal sea temperatures in this way, but offers a new pathway for researchers and conservationists to pursue in their efforts to preserve them in the face of warming oceans. Our work further demonstrates how CRISPR can be used to elucidate aspects of coral physiology that can be used to guide conservation, says Philip Cleaves, who led the research. This time we've focused on one particular heat tolerance gene, but there are so many more mechanisms to reveal in order to truly understand coral biology and apply this knowledge to protecting these important communities. Yeah, it is really amazing to me the lengths to which we will go to utilize technology in devastating ways, and then how long it takes for progress to happen in in the more constructive ways we always think technology is going to be used for. We just have another brief tidbit from Zero Hedge Breakthrough. IBM and Fujifilm developed new magnetic tape with 580 terabyte capacity. Now, it's very strange to me that magnetic tape would still be used. Although given the communications disruption we had with the Nashville bombing, I always advocate removing information from any streaming website or anything that you're utilizing and have it cold hard on your hard drive, solid state drive, whatever have you. But mass quantities of information, server side, server farms have to exist and things like that. So I can understand there needing to be some alternative to a cloud situation. The Zero Hedge reads, the world produces 2.5 quintillion bytes of data daily due to the Internet of Things, the emergence of 4K and 8K videos, and the proliferation of artificial intelligence and automation. By 2025, worldwide data could soar to 175 zettabytes, representing 61% annual growth. Thanks to the virus pandemic, the rapid digitization of the economy sparking a massive push in remote working among corporations have also resulted in a massive increase in data storage. So, where is all this data being stored? More than 500 hyperscale data centers are scattered across the world, storing an estimated 547 exabytes with an estimated 151 facilities currently under development. According to IBM, there is only one technology that can handle the massive growth of digital data, keep it protected from cybercrime attacks, and is archiving data for some of the largest hyperscale data centers in the world, is a technology more than 60 years old: magnetic tape. What? No. More than a decade ago, IBM partnered with Fuji to advance the technology in magnetic tape. What they developed is a new tape that can store huge amounts of critical data. The new tape can achieve a storage capacity of 317 gigabytes per square inch. Whoa. Which means that a single tape is capable of storing 580 terabytes of data. How long is a single tape? Putting 580 terabytes into perspective for readers, it is equivalent to 786,977 CDs that no one uses, stacked 944 meters high, which is taller than the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. Now that's incredible, to be quite honest with you. The breakthrough aimed at advancing decades-old technology came when researchers from both companies developed a brand new tape with strontium ferrite instead of using barium ferrite, which has been used to create the tape for years. Strontium ferrite offers the potential for higher density storage in the same amount of tape. So, technology marches forward. One of these days, I really want to go through the Neuralink extensively. But, I always kind of want to weigh out what inevitably is critically negative news and commentary with something else, anything else. Uh, I I was going, and here's the thing: the counter to that is, as I've mentioned, as we march forward, technology still continues to be the decimator of the environment that it is. The World Economic Forum, which I have my issues with, but that's a different conversation. The World Economic Forum reads, "These facts show how unsustainable the fashion industry is." Now, if you're going to wear makeup, you're going to do that. That's your thing. Fashion and makeup, obviously, are two different industries, but both work hand in hand and coincide with the sorts of abuses of natural resources that they utilize, and how their production, their manufacturing capabilities, as vast as they are widely damaging to the environment as well as people. Like cosmetic makeup causes massive amounts of damage to people's epidermis. It causes all sorts of things, and they're not even started. Fast fashion, reads World Economic Forum, makes shopping for clothes more affordable, but it comes at an environmental cost. The fashion industry produces 10% of all of humanity's carbon emission and is the second largest consumer of the world's water supply. Some parts of modern life, I want to say, it wouldn't surprise me if the first was like either soda or pharmaceuticals. Some parts of modern life are, at this point, widely known, reads the article, to cause environmental harm, flying overseas, using disposable plastic items, and even driving to and from work, for example. But when it comes to our clothes, the impacts are less obvious. As consumers worldwide buy more clothes, the growing market for cheap items and new styles is taking a toll on the environment. On average, people bought 60% more garments in 2014 than they did in 2000. Fashion production makes up 10% of humanity's carbon emission, dries up water sources, and pollutes rivers and streams. What's more, 85% of all textiles go to the dump each year. And washing some type of clothes sends thousands of bits of plastics into the ocean. Here are the most significant impacts fast fashion has on the planet. Clothing production has roughly doubled since 2000. While people bought 60% more garments in 2014 than in 2000, they only kept the clothes for half as long. In Europe, fashion companies went from an average offering of 2 collections per year in 2000 to 5 in 2011. Some brands offer even more. Zara puts out 24 collections per year, while H&M offers between 12 and 16. A lot of this clothing ends up in the dump. The equivalent of one garbage truck full of clothes is burned or dumped in a landfill every second. In total, up to 85% of textiles go into the landfill each year. That's enough to fill Sydney Harbor annually. Washing clothes, meanwhile, releases 500,000 tons of microfibers into the ocean each year, the equivalent of 50 billion plastic bottles. Many of those fibers are polyester, a plastic found in an estimated 60% of garments. Producing polyester releases 2 to 3 times more carbon emissions than cotton, and polyester does not break down in the ocean. A 2017 report from the International Union of Conservation of Nature estimated that 35% of all microplastics, very small pieces of plastic that never biodegrade, in the ocean came from the laundering of synthetic textiles like polyester. Another quick tidbit is it's said by 2050 that if we continue plastic production as we do, there will be more plastic in all of the world's oceans and bodies of water than there is aquatic life. I don't even know how that's possible. I mean, through technology, really. It's an exponential growth. As we continue to use it, we find more efficient ways to use it. But, down the rabbit hole we go. First the environmental destruction, and then really the cultural destruction follows suit with the technocracy as it marches forward. The U.S. to allow small drones to fly over people and at night. This is all about the drone the drone delivery system. For sure. I definitely agree. One second. The drone delivery system, the wave of the future. I believe Amazon already had a pilot program in Manhattan. But Reuters reads, small drones will be allowed to fly over people at night in the United States, the FAA said on Monday, a significant step towards their use for widespread commercial deliveries. The FAA said its long-awaited rules for the drones, also known as unmanned aerial vehicles, will address security concerns by requiring remote identification technology, RFID, in most cases to enable their identification from the ground. Previously, small drone operations over people were limited to operations over people who were directly participating in the operation, located under a covered structure or inside a stationary vehicle, unless operators had obtained a waiver. The rules will take effect 60 days after publication in the Federal Register in January. Drone manufacturers will have 18 months to begin producing drones with remote ID, and operators will have an additional year to provide remote ID. There are other, more complicated rules that allow for operations at night and over people for larger drones in some cases. Quote unquote, the new rules make way for the further integration of drones into our airspace by addressing safety and security concerns, FAA Administrator Steve Dixon said. They get us closer to the day where we will more routinely see drone operations, such as the delivery of packages. Companies have been racing to create drone fleets to speed deliveries. The United States has over 1.7 million drone registrations and 203,000 FAA-certified remote pilots. For at-night operations, the FAA said drones must be equipped with anti-collision lights. The final rules allow operations over moving vehicles in some circumstances. What? In what? Okay, remote ID is required for all drones weighing 0.55 pounds or more, but it is required for smaller drones under certain circumstances like flights over open-air assemblies. Oh, man. The new rules eliminate requirements that drones be connected to the internet to transmit location data, but do that they broadcast remote ID messages via radio frequency broadcasts. Without the change, drone use could have been barred from use in areas without internet access. I do not see this going well, but that's me always thinking the worst. It is a march towards our inevitable future here, where the Internet of Things will integrate with a sea of unmanned vehicles. It will first be drones, but then will be unmanned ground vehicles. We've seen they have pilot programs in Walmart of automated like robots that greet you and like give you like a display of items, things like that. We've seen automation take place in fast food industry. Self-checkout lines, but self-checkout lines is like, it's like by the wayside. It's nothing. But that really is a thing now. That really is the future, where most people will prefer to just do it themselves. And this is just another push towards that. In 10 years, I imagine you will see, McDonald's and other, Uber Eats and things like that. It will be a determination as to which will be cheaper, right? Because if you can just get your food delivered by drone, you won't have to, first of all, worry about traffic. Secondly, you won't have to worry about any sort of incidents that may or may not occur. I just ordered my food tonight. Guy left it on the railing, and of course it fell over and destroyed the meal and everything. And it's just like, it's upsetting. But case in point, right? You don't have to worry about issues like those. But I digress. And I'm still upset about that, obviously. So continuing on the downslope of things. I mean, that's not really a downslope. I foresee that being another avenue of troublesome possibilities. But that's really with anything. So there have been numerous shootings and terrorist incidents, most of which I honestly have been unaware of until recently. I mean, they've happened recently, in my defense and in everyone else's defense, but there's really little news or publication in mainstream media about a lot of these things going on. So we'll begin with this. The BuzzFeed reads, the Ohio police officer who fatally shot Andre Hill has been fired. Andre Hill, a 47-year-old unarmed black man, was fatally shot December 22nd by a Columbus police officer within seconds of their encounter. An Ohio coroner has ruled that the police killing of Andre Hill, an unarmed black man, last week in Columbus was a homicide. The Franklin County Coroner's Office announced the determination in a brief statement Monday, saying that its preliminary investigation shows Hill, 47, died of multiple gunshot wounds. Body camera footage shows Hill stepping out of an open garage door and holding up his cell phone as two Columbus police officers approach him shortly after 1:30 a.m. on December 22nd. Within seconds, Officer Adam Coy shoots him. On Monday, Coy, a 19-year department veteran, was fired. The officers were responding to a non-emergency call regarding a man sitting in an SUV for an extended period, repeatedly turning the vehicle on and off. It is unclear if Hill was the man described in the call. He is believed to have been visiting someone's home when he was killed. Andre Hill's death is another tragic example of the tendency of police to view black people as criminal or dangerous, and it points to the need for comprehensive national police reform, Ben Crump, the Hill family attorney, tweeted following the coroner's announcement. The family wants to review all the body cam footage as soon as possible. Earlier on Monday, Ned Pettis Jr., the director of public safety, held a disciplinary hearing for Coy after Columbus Police Chief Thomas Quinlan recommended he be fired. Hours later, Pettis issued a statement saying he was upholding the chief's recommendation and terminating his employment. The actions of Adam Coy do not live up to the oath of a Columbus police officer or the standards we in the community demand of our officers. Pettis added that the additional allegations of misconduct involving Coy and other officers who responded to the incident are still under investigation. Meanwhile, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation is determining whether Coy will face criminal charges. The incident marks the second time in weeks that police have killed a black man in Columbus. On December 4th, Casey Goodson Jr., 23, was fatally shot with no body camera footage or witnesses beyond the sheriff's deputy who fired his gun. Unbelievable. And what's more is that I can't say that I find it surprising, honestly. There was recently an incident in Ohio where a guy got creamed in the face with a twisted tea can. He was a white guy who was, floating around the N-word, you know what I mean? Just, he wasn't calling the black dude, you know what I mean? He was just like, you just like talk, he was just saying it like he was a black dude. And then he, blah, blah, blah. Most of you probably know what happened. In Ohio, I was unaware that race relations were contentious in that sort of way. Dave Chappelle is from Ohio. If that gives any perspective as to how race, I guess, is viewed or should be viewed by, but I don't know. Dave Chappelle's is definitely an anomaly. But I have heard nothing about this, and it's December 29th, so it's a week later. Perhaps I just have target fixation on certain things, but I mean, everything is compounding on the obvious need to address the militarization of the police force, which has occurred. It started really under Bill Clinton, where you started seeing an uptick in like different types of training, urban combat training, things like that, and higher fund and larger amounts of funding related to APCs and military type hardware. And then post 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security pretty much mandated that all law enforcement kind of act as a pseudo militarized force. And I mean, you saw the advent of no-knock warrants and what is it? The no-knock warrants, the expansion of the no-fly list, and just a heavy-handed approach. And initially, I mean, and again, the heavy-handed approach, the sort of jackbooted style in urban areas is nothing new. It's only increased in its intensity and expanded, right? And then the post 9/11 world, it initially was really a sort of Islamophobia, xenophobia that was occurring. And now that seems to have subsided, and they've kind of gone back to what they know best, I guess. I mean, and here's the thing. I know that not every police officer is like that, but it's not about each individual police officer. It's about overall departments being trained in a militarized fashion. That's that therein, and that I think encapsulates an aspect of it. But just as well, imagine as a bigoted person being being equipped with that sort of training. Like, it adds insult to injury. Police end up eventually, the blue wall and all that, end up being another gang at the end of the day when they act in that fashion. And most of the time they act in that fashion. But Casey Goodson Jr., I didn't know about this until I just read the article. And there's no witnesses, no body cameras, no cell phone video, and only the officer's story of what happened. Yeah. So, in the case of another individual, a young person this time, killed. Feds declined charges against officers in Tamir Rice's case. Tamir Rice, I'm looking for listeners, not viewers. I'm looking at his headstone and his epitaph, and it reads: Tamir Rice was playing in the park when police were called. The 911 call reveals the caller said Rice was probably a juvenile waving around a pistol, which is probably fake. The officer arrived and shouted 3 times from his car for Rice to show his hands. When Rice did not comply, the officer charged him and shot twice from 10 feet away. 12-year-old Rice was shot within 2 seconds of the officer exiting his car. Tamir died the next day from a bullet wound to his torso. The AP reads, the Justice Department announced Tuesday that it would not bring federal criminal charges against 2 Cleveland police officers in the 2014 killing of 12-year-old Tamir Rice, saying video of the shooting was of too poor a quality for prosecutors to conclusively establish what had happened. In closing the case, the department brought to an end a long-running investigation into a high-profile shooting that helped galvanize the Black Lives Matter movement and that became a part of the national dialogue about police use of force against minorities, including children. The decision, revealed in a lengthy statement, does not condone the officer's actions, but rather says the cumulative evidence was not enough to support a federal criminal civil rights prosecution. Because under a civil rights prosecution, the concept would be that it was basically a hate crime. And it would be difficult for them to determine that they basically executed this kid because he was black. That would be my presumption as to why they would. That would be my presumption to the excuse that they would. Because it's like, I don't understand this. If you make no attempt to engage non-violently, if you get out of your car and shoot someone and you make no attempt to engage non-violently, I won't go so far as to say it's premeditated. Although if you sat in the car and watched for a moment and yelled at him, and you know what I mean, then that could be considered premeditated. I mean, there was time lapsed between him being there and the kid being shot, but not between him getting out of his car and the kid being shot. He got out of his car and shot the kid. So I think one could argue perhaps that it was premeditated. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just spitballing here. But you can't tell me that there's at least not a case for manslaughter. At the very least, murder, second degree. Right? AP continues, Tamir was playing with a pellet gun outside a recreation center in Cleveland, Ohio. Right? Here we go. Ohio again. I had no idea Ohio was this contentious. On November 22nd, 2014, when he was shot and killed by Officer Timothy Lohman, who was white, seconds after Lohman and his partner, Officer Frank Garnback, arrived on the scene. Presumably, he's also white. The officers were called to the recreation center after a man drinking beer and waiting for a bus called 911 to report that a guy, quote-unquote, was pointing a gun at people. The caller told a 911 dispatcher that it was probably a juvenile and that the gun might be fake, though that information was never relayed to the officers. Why is that? To bring federal civil charges in cases like these, the Justice Department must prove that an officer's actions willfully broke the law rather than being the result of a mistake. Oh, see, I was given the benefit of the doubt as to like the intent of a hate crime. Of course he willfully broke the law. How can you got out the car and shot someone, and this is after you had been sitting in the car yelling at you who you then got out and shot without engaging in nonviolently? I wouldn't call any of that a mistake. You accidentally, you know what I mean, unclipped the holster to your pistol, accidentally pulled it out, accidentally pointed it at him, accidentally pulled the trigger. Really? Come on. This is you really? Come on now. I lost my place. Where was I? Right. The Justice Department has to prove that the actions of the officer was willful in breaking the law rather than being the result of a mistake, negligence, or bad judgment. I mean, I think choosing to murder someone's always bad judgment. It has been a consistently tough burden. It's been a consistently tough burden for federal prosecutors to meet across both Democratic and Republican administrations, with the Justice Department declining criminal charges against police officers in other high-profile cases in recent years, including in the deaths of Eric Garner, right, in New York City, and Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. In a statement, Subda Chandra, an attorney for the boy's family, said the Justice Department's process was tainted, and the family has demanded prosecutors provide additional information about recommendations made during the probe. It's beyond comprehension that the department couldn't recognize that an officer who claims he shouted commands when the patrol car's window was closed and it was a winter day is lying. The Rice family has been cheated of a fair process yet again. In this case, the Justice Department said poor quality surveillance video recorded in the area where the shooting took place prevented prosecutors from being able to conclusively determine whether Rice was or was not reaching for his toy gun just prior to being shot. Irrelevant. The two officers who were investigated told authorities. This is the thing. They make because they've politicized the law enforcement process, right? The jackbooted, heavy-handed. And here's the thing, to me, this is not even like a jackbooted, heavy-handed situation. It's not like a no-knock warrant. This is the case of in Ohio, where this seems to be going down quite often of like a black kid being shot by a white cop. Because here's the thing. Irrelevant of whether the kid pointed the gun or pulled it or anything like that, officers are not supposed to engage in a violent execution of dealing with the perpetrator first. That's not supposed to be first, unless that's what they're being trained in. And this is what I've been talking about the militarization of the police force. Outside of there being a plethora of racists, and more likely this guy being a racist. And that's the thing. This seems to be a thing where these cops just like, oh, hey, stop. Hey, okay, well, I yelled. Okay, bang, bang. This seems to be a thing. But across the nation, really, and across the world, we've seen a massive militarization of police force and the justification of it by every administration, really. Let me see here. But the video reviewed by federal prosecutors makes the sequence of events less clear. The grainy time-lapse video, which has no audio, does not show detail or perspective, and the camera's view is obstructed by a police patrol car, prosecutors said. In addition, they said, though the positioning of the boy's arms suggests that they were in the vicinity of his waist, his hands are not visible in the video, and it cannot be determined from the video what he was doing. Unbelievable. But again, not surprising. And also not publicized for obvious reasons. If they thought they had seen, and that's the thing, as this continues where you're seeing stricter lockdown measures in different states, they're going to want to suppress things like this more and more and more often and kind of dominate the news with as much pandemic narrative as possible, while just a storm of horrible things are happening all over the place. Here's another incident. We're moving now into domestic terrorist territory. There was a shooting. Where was this? In an Illinois bowling alley. Recently, something else I hadn't heard about and it hadn't seen publicized. And they found out if he was a Special Forces soldier. Army Times reads, Special Forces soldier charged in Rockford shooting may have PTSD, lawyer says. An attorney for the U.S. Army Special Forces sergeant arrested in what authorities call an apparent random shooting in an Illinois bowling alley that left 3 people dead, told an initial hearing on Monday that her client may suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Duke Webb, 37, faces 3 counts of murder and 3 counts of first-degree attempted murder for injuring 3 others in the shooting at Don Carter Lanes in Rockford on Saturday evening. According to Army Service information, Webb had 4 deployments in Afghanistan, the most recent ending in July. His lawyer, Elizabeth Bucko, also told the hearing in a Winnebago County courtroom that Webb appeared to have issues with memory loss. She added that he will undergo mental health evaluations. The judge denied bond for Webb, meaning he will remain jailed. His arraignment was set for February 16th. He was taken into custody shortly after the shooting without officers firing a shot. Now, I wonder if he had been black, right, or Muslim. We see a lot of the time the Muslim guys with the knives, they get aced immediately, okay? And I'm not justifying any of it across the board, but you start to see a pattern crop up. And it's like, wow, so the Muslim guys with the knives and the black kids with toys, they get aced immediately. But like full-on special force, and of course they don't know he's a special forces officer, but like full-on military dudes shooting out people and this is in Illinois, white guys on white guy violence. I don't mean to like but you see the pattern. You see it. You just see it, and you just gotta like point it out. Like, it is what it is. And it's just very interesting. Like, they didn't seem to like shoot this guy in sight, and this guy murdered 3 people, and he shot 3 others. Right? And they approach him. He's still got the weapon in his hand. They don't shoot him on sight. Right? Interesting. Fascinating. Fucking unbelievable. I'm sorry. The suspect has no ties to the victim, and authorities believe this man was a completely random act. And it's like, my whole thing is, it's irrelevant. Just like with the officers who shot the kid, it's irrelevant. You're looking towards intent to justify to justify what will be for you bad optics. Oh no, we don't want to prosecute police officers and military servicemen members. We stand by. Like, get the fuck out of here. You have clear cut cases of at the very least manslaughter, right? At the very least. Right. And I mean, really, it is murder. And I think the argument over murder would be premeditated, because it's a case where, these people like see from a distance. They kind of like approach and assess in a way in some cases. And in some cases, they don't assess at all. And the first idea for engagement is violent. I digress. It's just all of this stuff kind of gets slipped under the radar. And it's like, oh, there's the pandemic happening, guys. Let's just worry ourselves about this. So we're moving now into more politicized range of things. Obviously, with domestic terrorism, there's always the consideration that there's a political motive. We don't know with the Illinois bowling alley shooter as of yet. This recently happened, but this Dayton shooter, they've looked at his social media. Done the due diligence as most are to do in these scenarios, and he's a self-proclaimed leftist. Now, this isn't going to get publicized at all, and I don't mean to like make it a situation where, oh no, let's look at the left, oh no, it's the right. It's just, when these things happen, it's good to simply identify who, what, where, how, and when. Now, obviously, this happened some time ago, but when there's violence from the right, I point out violence from the left. When there's violence from the left, I point out violence from the right. Let's just keep it real. Like, these are people, these are zealots all around, and they are stymieing any sort of cultural progress that we may have. And while the cultural progress gets stymied, we still have the technological march forward, desensitizing all of us to really what is the deconstruction of everything that is intangible, right? So while we grow technologically speaking, and our Internet of Things becomes vast, wide, and we have these developments that are great in and of themselves, they don't seem to award any sort of, I don't know, emotional or mental maturity on the part of our species. But Dayton shooter Connor Betts described himself as a leftist who hated Trump, wanted Elizabeth Warren for president, and was pro-gun control. His now suspended social media account show. Here's quickly, Connor Betts was 24. He described himself as a leftist, according to his Twitter account. His account was removed on Sunday, shortly after he gunned down 9 people in Dayton, Ohio. Ohio again. The Twitter account regularly retweeted extreme left-wing posts and bemoaned the election of Donald Trump. His social media posts often showed support for Senator Elizabeth Warren, as he called for a revolution against the rich. And this is what I mean. Ultimately, all of us, whether they be zealots on the left or the right, or those who can communicate effectively on the left or the right, even in the center, we realize ultimately that this is a class war. Outside of our race war, outside of our nationalist war, right? Us versus them. Ultimately, it's those who have consolidated power and wield it against us all day, every day, and allow their cronies in and through the back door that really don't, they just laugh at our partisanship. But just hours before the Dayton shooting, he retweeted posts in support of gun control and liked several tweets about the massacre in El Paso, Texas. So, moving along through my internet seems to have failed me. Still on the tip of domestic terrorism. We recently had another attack in Colorado, and I don't know why they're not calling it terrorism. It's all terrorism. excuse me, whether to scare or to kill, it's still terrorism. Uh, this one came as Colorado will fall to 2 degrees tonight, and it seems very strategic, right? So the first one in front of an AT&T building causes a communication outage and affects like the FAA. The second one affects heat for Aspen, Colorado, right when it's going to fall to 2 degrees at a critical moment. You know what I mean? And they have to individually, as a read, they have to individually light thousands of pilots. It's going to take time, longer than the night of tonight. To continue, let's see, thousands of Colorado residents without heat after attack on gas service. The temperature in Aspen, Colorado will fall to 2 degrees tonight, reads ABC. The FBI has joined a criminal investigation of what police said appears to be an intentional attack. Wow, intentional. It's called terrorist. On a gas lines in Aspen that left thousands of residents and businesses without heat as temperatures in the skiing mecca plunged to near zero. Work crews are scrambling to restore gas services, and local authorities handed out electric space heaters to residents still without heat, as a storm front is forecast to bring up to 8 inches of snow in the region this week. Temperatures are forecast to fall to 2 degrees in Aspen on Tuesday. Aspen police said their apparently coordinated attacks of vandalism occurred Saturday night as 3 separate Black Hills Energy gas line sites, one in Aspen and two elsewhere in Pickett County, were hit. At one of the target sites, police said they found the words Earth First scrawled, and investigators were looking into whether the self-described radical environmental group Earth First was involved. Emails from ABC News to the group's website seeking comment were not returned. Aspen's police chief told reporters that the saboteurs appeared to have some familiarity with the natural gas system. They tampered with the flow lines, they turned off the gas lines. Lynn said physical evidence recovered at the scenes of the vandalism include footprints left in the snow. He said there were no security cameras, really guys, at the 3 locations that were hit. The FBI, which has a critical infrastructure protection unit, is helping to investigate. They said that about 3,500 customers were affected by the gas outage, and crews had to go to each natural gas meter to manually turn them off and relight the pilots. Officials said the work was continuing Tuesday, but it was unclear how long it would take before gas service is restored to everyone. They handed out about 6,000 portable space heaters. And of course, numerous businesses, restaurants, hotels were shut down due to the gas. So as this develops and we learn more about the Nashville bomber and now the Colorado bombing, I guess the Aspen bombing too, I don't know. My first thought was like, wow, it seems to be utilities are being attacked suddenly around Christmas time. But we will see going forward. I'd also like to point out that all of these incidents are never seemingly called acts of terrorism. And they always are approached with this sort of tread lightly, eggshell sort of hands-off approach. But that's fine. We don't really know much as of yet. Oh, hold on, yeah. And then here we go. This is what I'm saying. It's almost, to me, an act of terrorism, says Pitkin County Commissioner Patty Clapper, who lost the heat to the vandalism. So what is the difference between terrorism and vandalism? I mean, if the effect was not to put thousands of people without heat for an extended period, possibly endangering their lives, I don't understand. Does it have to be like theocratic in nature? Do they have to be promoting some god? What about the god of nature? Well, Mother Gaia. There you go. There's your god. Now it's terrorism, right? I just don't understand. Why does it have to be like have a religious orientation, or why does it have like a nationalist or come like from a state? It has to be state sponsored in order to be terrorism. State sponsored terrorism is what we hear. I just don't. I always ask for nuance, and it's like this is semantic. This is semantical. This is too much nuance. This is unnecessary nuance. But I digress. We'll see in the days to come. Going into the pandemic news, I found this funny. So this is just a tweet from someone named Garbage Human. I don't know who that is. But the tweet is a retweet of someone tweeting out. So they say, for the listeners, they say, shout out to the United flight attendant that called mask mandates nonsense. So they tagged United Airlines in the tweet. So United Airlines reached out and said, hi, Jess, what's your flight number? Jess replies, "I'm not a snitch." And then, I mean, that's it. That was it. They didn't ask her again. But I just found that amusing that the if you see something, say something sort of mind state has reached into COVID. As we go into vaccination stage and we go into proximity detection, I have the app on my phone. I don't use it, but I just observe updates, things of nature that may or may not happen. But I found that amusing, a little haha. As we figured, as we all figured, and as Dr. Fauci also figured, the UK variant is here. Colorado confirms first known U.S. case of COVID-19 strain believed to be more contagious. Colorado has confirmed the first known U.S. case of the new strain that was first identified in the U.K. Today, we discovered Colorado's first case of the COVID-19 variant B117, the same variant discovered in the U.K. The health and safety of Coloradans is our top priority, and we will monitor this case as well as all COVID-19 indicators very closely, says Colorado Governor Jared Polis on Twitter. Colorado State Laboratory confirmed the case and notified the CDC. The governor's office said in a statement, the patient is a man in his 20s who's recovering in isolation in Elbert County, outside Denver. He has no travel history and no close contacts. Public health officials were conducting investigation, so who knows where he got it from. It is more contagious, but not more deadly, and it has an increased transmission rate of 70% compared with other variants in the UK. Wow. But that we everyone kind of expected that. It was only a matter of time. We're waiting for places like California to see it. Travel, and you would think travel hubs would get it. That only makes sense. But interestingly enough, that gentleman in particular, at least, has no travel history, according to USA Today. So we'll see it going. As always, we will see going forward. It is of no surprise to me. But again, you would expect that it would be someone who recently traveled. So, yeah, all you can do is try and restrict travel the best that you can without being, a jackboot militant, and hope for the best. But California has the strictest, or some of the strictest, lockdown laws. Though recently, Gavin Newsom has created an ICU availability related lockdown. So if ICU admissions in particular areas get below ICU availability gets below 15%, then he'll initiate a lockdown in said areas. It's already happened in places like Southern California, which is where Santa Barbara is. But California is now reporting the highest number of new daily COVID-19 cases per capita in the country. Shout out Santa Barbara, sorry. Last week, the state reported the nation's fourth highest number of daily COVID-19 cases per 100,000 residents over a 7-day period. But California jumps to first place when the CDC updated its per capita tracker Saturday. According to the CDC update from Saturday, California's reported an average of 100 daily COVID-19 cases per 100,000 residents over the past 7 days, which places it comfortably ahead of second place Tennessee, which saw an average of 89 daily cases per 100,000 residents. Now, here's my whole thing, and I always will repeat this. Simple infection isn't enough. Symptomatic expression, ICU admission or availability, and death rate is all it all needs to be looked at and correlated with each other. As I'll always say, and that's why they keep pointing it out with the new UK strain, something being more contagious, right? Your ability to catch it doesn't necessarily mean that it's more deadly, right? If a bunch of people can catch something that's for the most part asymptomatic, so poor California, and this has happened in the recent weeks that he's implemented the lockdown. So it will be a few more weeks before we are able to see if the lockdowns will have any lasting effect. But yeah, Songbird. Songbird is a movie that is based on the COVID-19 pandemic. It is directed by Adam Mason, who wrote the screenplay with Simon Boyes. And you're just like, what? He's just talking about this film? And it's produced by Michael Bay, Adam Goodman, Andrew Sugarman, and Eben Davidson. It's got a bunch of people in it, most of which I haven't heard of, except Alexandria Daddario, Demi Moore, randomly, and Craig Robinson. But here's the thing. The project was announced in May of 2020. They came up with the idea in March, shortly after the pandemic stopped all film production. The cast joined in June. Filming took place around Los Angeles over July and August. It was the first film to have production following the shutdown. Yet it received no publicity whatsoever. It was released through premium video on demand on December 11th. It received generally negative reviews from critics who felt the film did not take advantage of its premise. Now, I haven't seen the movie yet, but and this will segue into what's happening in the New York State Legislature, right? This does have real world impact, or rather real world relevance. Uh, I just find it, I don't know, it's kind of refreshing that studios, that filmmakers, writers, and actors, producers alike, were not fearful of the topic. They were not fearful of the subject or the possibilities of what this scenario that we live in reality can bring in our future. From what I've seen in the trailer, this girl ends up getting caught in a lockdown in her building. Her neighbor catches it, meaning that her building's infected. The guys come to knock on the door, and she won't let them in. Now, the question you have to ask yourself, okay, well, why didn't she wait for them to leave and go out herself? From what it looks like, and I don't want to read the synopsis. I don't want to read the thing. But from what it looks like her apartment door is built in with like a lockdown mechanism in case the building becomes infected. Case in point, perhaps hypothetically in the future, that apartment complexes and buildings and things like that will be built with a lockdown mechanism in case there is a possible infection within your apartment complex. Now, again, I forgot to mention, I think this is very critical. This is dealing with not COVID-19, but COVID-23. So I presume that, yes, COVID-19, I'll read that much. COVID-19 has mutated into COVID-23. Now, here's the thing. What we're seeing now with the mutations in the UK and Nigeria, the UK and the South African version are the same mutation. So the UK, South African, and the Nigerian version is not a change in functionality, right? It's not a deadlier virus. It is just a more contagious virus. But perhaps that is the first step. And I don't mean to be an alarmist or sound like an alarmist, but that is the hypothetical, right? Because as we've read multiple times, numerous times, diseases, viruses, they mutate. That's natural. What they're looking for is a mutation in functionality. And as we've seen with it becoming more contagious, if it can become more contagious, what's to say that it can't become deadlier, can't become more severe? But with that being said, and I will definitely be doing a review of this movie on my other channel, my comic books channel, Greetings True Believers. Check it out. Yes, of course I love comic books. I have a Millennium Falcon this is my dude right here. But anyway, the reason why I bring up Songbird, besides the fact that I actually just watched the trailer tonight and I was just floored. It seemed like a pretty good movie, actually. But I was just floored by the nature of the movie and just like, wow, they actually went there with this. Apparently, in the New York State Senate, Assembly Bill A416 says, this is the language, it relates to the removal of cases, contacts, and carriers of communicable diseases who are potentially dangerous to the public health. I don't read that as any other way other than people who are sick being placed someplace. Let's read that again. This bill, Assembly Bill A416, relates to the removal of cases, contacts, and carriers of communicable diseases, of which COVID is one, who are potentially dangerous to public health. Now, if you declare someone who is infected with COVID, like COVID being a public health danger, someone who is infected needs to be quarantined because they are a danger to the public health, I believe they would fit under this guideline. I can't see how they would not. So this is just like a synopsis, I guess, of the more critical parts, and this is a lot longer than I remember reading because I read it on my phone. For those of you who are listening, I'm currently looking at an excerpt of the bill. Let's just read section 1. The public health law is amended by adding a new section. The section reads as follows: removal and detention of cases, contacts, and carriers who are or may be a danger to public health. Other orders are, the provisions of this section shall be utilized in the event that the governor declares a state of health emergency due to an epidemic of any communicable diseases. New Jersey is still under a state of emergency. Number 2. Upon determining by clear and convincing evidence that the health of others is or may be endangered by a case, contact, or carrier, or suspected case, contact, or carrier of a contagious disease that, in the opinion of the governor, after consultation with the commissioner, may pose an imminent and significant threat to the public health resulting in severe morbidity or high mortality, the governor or his or her delegee, including but not limited to the commissioner or the heads of local health departments, may order the removal of such a person or of such a group of persons by issuing a single order identifying such persons either by name or by a reasonably specific description of the individuals or group being detained. So let's break that down. With a declaration of a state of health emergency by the governor, local health departments can order, the commission heads of local health departments, the commissioner of the health department or the heads of local health departments, there we go, can order people to be removed or detained by issuing a single order or identifying people by name or a reasonably specific description. Reasonably specific. So he's 5'11", black, hoodie, right? Let's keep going. A person or group removed or detained by order of the governor or his or her delegee pursuant to subdivision 2 of this section shall be detained for such a period in such a manner as the department may direct in accordance with this section. So they can do whatever they want. They can hold you indefinitely. That's pretty much the meat and potatoes of it. Shall not detain. The department determines with the exercise of due diligence that such person is not infected with or has not been exposed to such a disease. So you can't be determined. Once you are determined to not be infected, then you can be released. A person who is detained pursuant to subdivision 2 of this as a contact or confirmed case or carrier shall not continue to be detained after the department determines that the person is not infected. Unbelievable. So that's the road that we are headed towards. This just came up today. I believe this just came up today in the state legislature. I will, as always, continue. January 6th, 2021. What did this enact? Wait, so I think this is already a law, actually. Yes, it passed. I like this. New York State Senate. I've never been to this. I need to go to this site more often. So I'm at, for the listeners, the New York State Senate.gov site, excuse me. And it has a little, Schoolhouse Rock, I'm just a bill. Well, it actually has a graphic of the process here, introduced in committee on the floor calendar. It, I believe, has passed the Senate and passed the Assembly. They're going to deliver it to the governor, and it's either going to be signed or vetoed. This is definitely going to get signed. This is going to get signed, and it's supposed to be put into act January 6th, 2021. So I will definitely keep my eye on that as that develops. Like I said, as of yet, I haven't seen mainstream media cover it. And I usually go after the things mainstream media tends to not go after. Yes, by choice, but that's what comes up on my feed. I have feeds for, dozens of different sources, and most of it I just kind of swipe away because it's mostly kind of skewed garble. But that does not surprise me. That does not surprise me at all. And if you compile that with the contact tracing apps, because in the movie Songbird, what ends up happening is, just in the trailer, no spoilers here. In the trailer, she scans what presumably is a family member. It comes up, anomaly found. Armed guards or armed somebody will be to your home within 4 to 6 hours. Please do not try to leave. Presumably that's when the lockdown happens within the home. And so we are seeing the development of those sorts of mechanisms being put into place where with the snap of a finger, well, not snap of a finger, I don't want them to seem that that despotic, but this is definitely a despotic bill to be sure. And I mean, like I said, I believe New Jersey's still under a state of emergency. A state of emergency can be declared under the guise of a massive increase in infection rate. Again, I will always point out, just because you are infected, it's not a death sentence. If some higher infection rates do not guarantee higher death rates, right? But I digress. Obviously, you don't want people to get sick. but I wanted to point this out because this was brought to my attention and I feel like it's important. To continue, we are now moving into more election hoopla on the bottom end of the show. DOS responds to Republican lawmakers' claim of election numbers discrepancy. What's ended up happening is that a group of Republican lawmakers say they've performed an extensive analysis of election data and they've found troubling discrepancies. Now, of course, the article, local news, has to point out they are Republican lawmakers, so obviously they. And here's the thing: they could be Republican lawmakers who don't like Trump, but we don't know that, and it's unlikely. But it should be pointed out. To continue, according to State Rep Frank Ryan, representative from Lebanon, 17 lawmakers were sponsored and participated in the analysis. Ryan, who is a certified public accountant, don't see why that's relevant, said, oh, well, obviously that's relevant in terms of numeric, right, in terms of counting. It says they discovered discrepancies between the numbers of total votes counted and the total number of voters who voted in the 2020 general election. Let's read that again. Ryan, who is a certified public accountant, says they discovered discrepancies between the numbers of total votes counted and the total number of voters who voted in the 2020 general election, which is making them question how the results could have been certified by Governor Tom Wolf and the Secretary of Commonwealth, Kathy Bachvar. According to Ryan, the analysis compared official county election results to the total number of voters who voted on November 3rd as recorded by the Department of State. Ryan says that they found 6,962,607 total ballots were reported as being cast, while the Sure System records indicated that only 6,760,000 total voters actually voted. Among the 6,962,000 total ballots cast, 6,931,000 total votes were counted in the presidential race, including all three candidates on the ballot and write-in candidates. He says the difference of 202,377 more votes cast than voters voting, together with the 31,000 over and under votes in the presidential race, adds up to a discrepancy of 170,830 votes, which is more than twice the reported statewide difference between Trump and Biden. Pennsylvania's election results were certified on the 24th, and Governor Wolf issued a certificate of ascertainment of presidential electors, stating that Biden received 80,000 more votes than Trump. And this has been ongoing, where everyone just kind of wants to, can we shut up and move on? And it's like, I understand that, but if you're claiming that the integrity of the process is what's at stake, then shouldn't the process be vetted and investigated? How can people who simultaneously say that things like the Electoral College should be disbanded or be reviewed and looked at also be clamoring to simply overlook alarming discrepancies? Now, here's the thing. You can be of multitudes of camps: election fraud, voter discrepancy, well, that's really it. Election fraud, voter discrepancy. Because it's like there are different types of voter discrepancy, whether it be voter rolls or, the Trump campaign tried to have the votes of illegal aliens thrown out, things like that. They're all different. But the fact remains is that if you're looking at the counting process, right, the assessment of the amount of votes for each candidate, if that process at the very least can't be vetted, then what's the point of any of this? Like, it's one thing to claim that there was purposeful fraud done. It's another to claim that, there were votes that shouldn't have been counted that were, for a variety of reasons. But when someone looks at the counting process and says, hey, we're seeing things that are wrong, and people don't want that to be vetted, I definitely start raising questions. Red flag comes up for me. Because it's not really at that point about the number of, it's always about the number of votes, but we're not looking at how the votes were done, whether certain people were allowed to vote, whether certain votes were allowed to be counted in the first place. We're looking at the counting process itself. That should always have a log, in which we saw the ASOG report says that, at least for the Dominion systems, they don't have a backlog, so they can't even identify who adjudicated over any adjudicated votes. And there's just tons of discrepancies all around. And the fact remains is that the Trump campaign did a poor job in presenting their case. And that's on them, regardless of if they had a case or not. Judges, a lot of the time, ended up throwing out their cases across the country because of technical issues, them having, typos, and them really not presenting anything but hearsay and lack of evidence, which is obviously very important. Sidney Powell and her garbage doesn't help either. It always seems like Trump always surrounds himself with crackpots, probably because he's the king of crackpots. But I digress. So, we have in Georgia, judge blocks voter purge in 2 Georgia counties. As you know, there's a runoff election. There's 2 elections going on in Georgia. There's Loeffler Purdue versus, what's his friggin' name? He's a reverend, and I always forget his Warnock. I always want to say Walton versus Warnock and whomever. But a federal judge, says Politico, in Georgia on Monday ordered 2 counties to reverse a decision removing more than 4,000 voters from the rolls ahead of the January 5th runoff elections that will decide control of the Senate. The judge, Leslie Abrams Gardner, the sister of Leslie Abrams Gardner, the sister of Stacey Abrams, a prominent ally of President Joe Biden, who has led voter registration efforts across the state, concluded that the counties appear to have improperly relied on unverified change of address data to invalidate registrations in the 2 counties. The bulk of the registrations that the counties sought to rescind, more than 4,000, were in Muskogee County, where Biden won handedly in November. An additional 150 were from Ben Hill County, which Trump won by a wide margin. So this seems to be a case of people who voted and then moved, or moved and then voted. The suit, brought by Majority Forward, represented by the National Democratic Party attorney Mark Elias, followed an effort to challenge a lengthy roster of voters simply because their registrations appeared to match U.S. Postal Service change of address records. Voting officials in the 2 counties agreed to remove the voters despite warnings from Democrats that such postal data is not a reliable or conclusive indicator that a voter has given up their local residence. Well, how else are you supposed to determine that the person who says that they live there and is supposedly able to vote there lives there? What else are you supposed to do? Here's the thing where, the law and reality intercede. More likely than not, these are the votes of a lot of black voters who would default to Biden. So it looks as though, and this could be the case as well, right? It looks as though that they're not trying to aim to follow the rule of law, but that they're trying to disenfranchise black voters. Why can't 2 things be true at once? Why can't this suit their needs, even though that is what it is that they're pursuing? Here's the thing. If a bad person pursues the rule of law, right, do we not follow the rule of law because they're a bad person? That's the interesting thing about the rule of law, right? Instead of looking at the person, you should look at the law. Is it fair that people who may have... And that's the thing. What is the situation? Because if it's a situation of people who moved and then are using their old address to vote, well, that's illegal, right? Depending on where it is that you're voting in the situation. But if there's situations that cannot be helped, that can be identified. But then you'd have to sort through each and every vote. So again, identifying not the fact that people voted, but how votes were counted. It's the process that needs to be identified and pointed out at. But as we've seen now, these 4,000 votes are not going to be rescinded. The evidence to challenge the 4,000 registrations was particularly sparse. The challenge was lodged December 14th by a local voter named Ralph Russell, who alleged that he had compared evidence from publicly accessible voter registration databases to prove that these voters had moved out of Georgia. I believe that each of the individuals named as a result of registering their name and change of address to a location outside of Muskogee County were moved to another state with the intention of making their new state their residence. Thus, each individual has lost their residence in Muskogee County, and consequently, each individual is ineligible to vote in Muskogee County, Russell told the county board. They met and backed his motion, even though he didn't attend the meeting and provided no additional evidence to support his challenge. Voters on Russell's list, per the board, would be required to vote by provisional ballot and present additional evidence of residency to vote. So here's the thing. I feel like that should have been done separate of Russell's motion, especially if he didn't show up and he didn't provide additional evidence. But again, that's trying to identify the errors in the process, whereas this seems more political than anything else. On what happened to a second opinion. You guys just, there's nobody did an investigation of this. That's the thing about it. Well, besides the lack of oversight is the lack of follow-up. But as usual, I digress. Here on the back end, we're really going to get into the left and the right playing their little games. Forbes says Biden says he's unlikely to cancel $50,000 in student loan debt by executive order, something he actually can do. I recently found out. Just real quick, Biden made his first public comments today in response to an ongoing campaign by progressive Democrats and consumer advocates to convince him to enact sweeping student loan forgiveness. Speaking candidly to the WAPO and others in the media about the challenges he will face in January and the limitations of his executive power, Biden said, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this. It's arguable that the president may have the executive power to forgive up to $50,000 in student debt. Well, I think that's pretty questionable. I'm unsure of that. I'd be unlikely to do that. Earlier in the day, Biden had reaffirmed his general support for broad student loan forgiveness, but suggested that he would support a smaller amount of $10,000. See, it's always austerity, always watching the money. Wanted to cut Social Security multiple times, wanted to raise the age. He was key in making sure that centrists were able to get their plan of $600 through rather than supporting his fellow Democrats in a push for at least $1,200. But that's the new president. We're going to go into Georgia last here. Actually, we're going to go into just a brief bit of partisanship. I just want to point this out because I've always advocated that news publications should try and remain as nonpartisan as possible, even though as a news publication goes, as far as editorial publications and censorship goes, most news, that's why news organizations call for a particular president. It seems like all media is politicized, just like most of science now is politicized. But the New York Post tells Trump to stop the insanity and end his undemocratic coup attempt. If it was and this is what I mean, coups are illegal. He's literally filing lawsuits. Like, you don't file lawsuits in order to take over a country indefinitely. That's not how coups work. I mean, oh my God. And here's the thing, people would like to bring up Hitler, but Hitler sought to be chancellor, was voted chancellor for life after the burning of the Reichstag under the Emergency War Powers Act, right? Under Emergency War Powers, I should say. So totally different situation. As much as I hate to make that comparison, because people love to call people on the right Nazis, and people on the right love to call people on the left snowflakes and all sorts of whatever, all that crap. But let's get into Georgia for a second. So Warnock is in Georgia. He's facing off against Loeffler, I believe. And he's been repeatedly, it's been pointed out that he's obstructed child abuse investigations, and he's had domestic violence allegations lodged against him. I was watching a video the other day, body cam footage of the cop that came to his house to his crying wife after he allegedly had run over her foot on purpose. So I'm just going to read a little bit from the Free Beacon about some alleged abuse that happened when he was running a camp. Camper recounts abuse at Warnock Church Camp. Among the indignities 12-year-old Anthony Washington endured at the church camp overseen by Reverend Raphael Warnock, counselors who tossed urine on him and locked him outside his cabin overnight. Washington, now 30, recounted the events in an interview with the Washington Free Beacon and said his experience at the camp resulted in a 2003 lawsuit that ended 2 years later, when Washington says he and his family received a large financial settlement. Washington's account of the 2002 events provides the first direct insight into the alleged abuse and neglect that transpired at Camp Farthest Out, which Warnock oversaw as senior pastor of Maryland Douglas's Memorial Community Church, and raises new questions for the Democrat who is currently vying for a Senate seat in Georgia. Washington expressed surprise when he was told Warnock is currently running. I don't think nobody like Warnock should be running for damn Senate nowhere running a camp like that, he told the Free Beacon. He should not be running for government. Warnock has faced scrutiny over his 2002 arrest for allegedly obstructing a child abuse investigation by Maryland State Police that centered on the camp's treatment of children. Washington's account is buttressed by records from the Maryland Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, obtained by the Free Beacon earlier this month. which indicated that campers were routinely left unsupervised. Staffers were not subject to require criminal background checks, and at least 5 cases of child abuse or neglect were brought against the camp's director, who was ultimately forced to resign. There's not much more detail. Warnock served as senior pastor of the church from 2001 until 2005. His job included overseeing the expansion of the sleepaway camp, which served inner-city children. Warnock's campaign did not respond to a request for comment. As far as churches go, we know they're tax-free and collect a lot of money, so, the one could speculate as to that. But as I do, I go left, I go right. So there we have a lot of immorality going on, and then right here we have a lot of corruption going on. Let me go back here. A pro-Trump lawyer called for Republican candidates David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler to be arrested as Georgia's runoff Senate race heats up. Lynn Wood, a conservative attorney and staunch Trump ally, seemed to suggest that Georgia's Republican senators David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler should be arrested ahead of the state's critical runoff race. In a tweet on Friday, Wood also urged Republicans to break the election in the state by refusing to vote, attaching a plan which repeats debunked allegations of voter fraud, of course. Real conservative senators can then be appointed. Nonsense. Anyway, but Lynn Wood, a conservative attorney and staunch Trump ally, suggested that they should be arrested. Wood, who spent the last few weeks spreading debunked allegations of voter fraud, also tweeted out an outlined plan to boycott the race. Let's see. I'm looking for the allegations. Of course. Oh, okay. So, diagram attached to Wood's allege that the Georgia election fraud committed by accomplished during the Dominion voting systems, yada, yada, yada. Here we go. This was my apologies. This was the article I meant. I did not realize. I thought the 2 articles were going to speak about the same thing. So, enough about that nut. That's more partisan bull. I don't know why they'd even write an article about her. Loeffler didn't disclose top donors own multi-billion-dollar company cited for illegal hiring scheme. The omissions for a company whose business Loeffler oversees strain credulity to the breaking point. Georgia's unelected Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler received several recent max-out donations from 10 members of the Aspen family, which owns the eponymous Pennsylvania-based utility and infrastructure clearing company, as well as from the company's president, according to 2 recent filings from the FEC. However, the Loeffler campaign filings did not fulfill the agency's requirement to report who employed those donors. Their company, Aspen Tree Expert Co., a Pennsylvania-based trimming company, notably settled a $95 million criminal settlement after a DHS investigation found the company circumvented laws to undercut competitors by hiring undocumented workers. So you get it from the left and you get it from the right. I always try and identify the fallibility of these people, because at the end of the day, they're people, and the fallibility of the people within the party, because they use the partisan dedication of regular good old-fashioned people, and they wield it against you. They wield it against us. But to seal the deal of irony here, Trump ends Obama's 12-year run as most admired man, Gallup poll says. This is from The Hill. Get this. President Trump has ended former President Obama's 12-year run as the most admired man in America, edging out his predecessor in the annual Gallup survey released Tuesday. 18% of the survey's respondents named Trump as their most admired man, compared to 15% who named Obama and 6% who named President-elect Joe Biden. 3% named National Institute of Allergy, they named Fauci, and while 2% chose Pope Francis. Rounding up the top 10 were Elon Musk, Bernie Sanders, Bill Gates, LeBron James, and the Dalai Lama, all of whom received 1%. Trump. Oh my God! It's just to try to put that in perspective. Like, according to this Gallup poll, Trump is more revered than the Dalai Lama. Oh my God! The sitting U.S. president has been named the pollsters' most admired man in 60 out of 74 years, including all 8 years of Obama's presidency and every year of George H.W. Bush's presidency except for 2008. Trump had finished second to Obama in 2017 and 2018. I mean, you can't... And I mean, okay. Among Republicans surveyed, 48% of respondents named Trump as their most admired man. Yeah, of course he split the party down the middle. Everyone knows that. But it's just the irony of that, given everything that's happened. People still I don't, and it's like I'd love to see. Well, we can go to Gallup and find out. Okay, so the pollster surveyed 1,000 adults from December 1st to December 17th. The poll has a margin of error of plus or minus 4 percentage points. So it's 1,000 people. But how bizarre that is. And here's the thing, I've mentioned that there are some policies that I agree with, very few, but most of his presidency has really been stymied as far as legislation goes. It has just been contentious as far as the individual partisanship amongst people go. When people talk about Trump, they generally don't talk about him affecting the stock market. They don't talk about him affecting unemployment for blacks and Latinos and across the board for everyone. They don't talk about the surplus in the economy. They generally talk about the more zealous members of his supporters, because not all of them are zealots. They talk about the zealous supporters. They talk about his inability or refusal to directly call out white supremacist groups, and they talk about how orange he is, and they talk about him directly being a racist. It's generally not policy related. It's generally character related. So my question regarding the survey is was the question asked in relation to policy or to personality? Did they just ask, like, who do you like? Or did they ask it relative to things that are happening? Like, did you, in regard, because I don't think it's individualized. I don't think it's like, in regards to liking President Trump, why did you like President Trump? In regard to the Dalai Lama, why do you like Dalai Lama? Why do you like Bill Gates? I don't think they ask why. I think it's just a matter of, do you like? Nuance is everything, but I digress. We are at the end here. Please like, share, and subscribe. I wish you all well. Be well to yourself and to each other. Take care.